What if Ned Stark brought the entire Northern army to King's Landing? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The Great Hall of Winterfell has never seen a gathering quite like this one. Beneath the stone arches and ancient banners, the most powerful lords of the North sit in council with their liege lord. Ned Stark stands at the head of the massive oak table, his weathered hands flat against the wood as he studies the faces before him. The Great John Umber fills his chair like a bear in armor, his massive frame barely contained by the carved seat. Roose Bolton sits with his pale eyes fixed on Ned, silent as always. Rickard Karstark leans forward eagerly, while Mage Mormont adjusts her leather gloves with practiced efficiency. The letter from King Robert lies open on the table between them. The royal seal, broken and curled at the edges, seems to mock the gravity of the moment. Ned has read its contents aloud 3 times now, but the words still hang heavy in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "The king wants you as his hand," the Great John rumbles, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "That's an honor, Ned, but it's also a trap." Catelyn Stark watches from her place beside the hearth. Her fingers work nervously at the sleeve of her dress as she listens to her husband's bannermen debate his future. She knows what Robert's request means. She knows what it will cost their family. "My lords," Ned says, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation, "I've made my decision. I will go south to serve as Robert's hand, but I will not go alone, and I will not go defenseless." The hall falls silent. Even the fire seems to quiet its crackling. Roose Bolton's pale eyes narrow. "What are you saying, my lord?" "I'm saying we marshal the full strength of the North. Every banner, every sword, every man who can march. We go south not as supplicants, but as the power we are." The Great John's chair groans as he shifts his massive weight. A slow grin spreads across his bearded face. "Now that's a plan I can stomach. How many men are we talking about?" Maester Luwin steps forward from the shadows, his chain clinking softly. "My lord, if we call upon every house, every vassal, we could field close to 45,000 men. Perhaps more if we include the mountain clans and the sworn swords of smaller houses." 45,000. The number settles over the room like a thundercloud. It represents the largest army the North has fielded since Robert's rebellion. It would be a host large enough to conquer kingdoms, not merely escort a lord to King's Landing. Rickard Karstark leans back in his chair, his scarred hands drumming against the table. "That many men would take weeks to organize, months to move south. Are you certain this is wise, Ned?" "Wisdom has nothing to do with it," Ned replies. "Jon Arryn is dead under suspicious circumstances. Robert drinks himself into an early grave while his queen plots in the shadows. The realm is a powder keg, and I'll not walk into it with just my household guard at my back." Catelyn rises from her place by the fire. "Ned, if you take the entire Northern army south, what happens to Winterfell? What happens to our children?" The question hangs in the air like a blade. Ned turns to face his wife, and for a moment the lord disappears, leaving only the man who loves her. "Robb stays," he says finally. "He's old enough to hold Winterfell in my name. Brandon will stay as well, under Maester Luwin's care. The castle guard remains, along with enough men to protect our lands." "And our daughters?" Catelyn's voice carries an edge that could cut glass. "Sansa and Arya come with us. They'll be safer under the protection of 40,000 northern swords than they would be in King's Landing with only guards who might be bought or threatened." The Great John pounds his fist on the table, making the pewter cups jump. "By the old gods and the new, I like this plan. Let the South Roans see what the North looks like when it moves as one. Let them count our banners and remember why they pay us respect." Mage Mormont nods approvingly. "My girls have been spoiling for a march. This will do them good." But Roose Bolton's voice cuts through the enthusiasm like a knife through silk. 45,000 men require feeding, Lord Stark. They require wagons, supplies, fodder for horses. The logistics alone could bankrupt the North. Then we make the South pay for it, Ned says grimly. Robert has grown fat on the wealth of King's Landing, while the North has paid its debts in blood and honor. It's time the Crown remembered what Northern loyalty is worth. Maester Lewin clears his throat. My lord, if I may. Moving such a host will not go unnoticed. Ravens will fly ahead of us. Every lord from the Neck to King's Landing will know we're coming. Good, Ned replies. Let them know. Let them count our strength and measure their words accordingly. With that decision made, the planning begins in earnest. Maps are unrolled across the table, showing the long road from Winterfell to King's Landing. The Greatjon volunteers to coordinate with the mountain clans, while Rickard Karstark promises to have his men ready to march within the fortnight. Maege Mormont speaks of bringing her daughter Daisy and a company of her finest warriors. Meanwhile, across the narrow sea in Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister sits in his solar reviewing reports from his spies. The parchment in his hands bears troubling news. Stark bannermen are calling their levies. Soldiers are gathering at Winterfell in numbers not seen since the rebellion. Every instinct tells the old lion that something significant is stirring in the north. He sets the report aside and reaches for a fresh quill. There are letters to write, preparations to make. If Ned Stark is mobilizing the north, the Lannisters must be ready to respond. Back in Winterfell, Catelyn finds her husband alone in the Godswood that night. The heart tree's red leaves rustle in the cold wind as Ned kneels before its carved face. She approaches quietly, her footsteps muffled by the fallen snow. "You're afraid," she says softly. Ned doesn't look up from his prayers. Terrified, he admits. But fear isn't an excuse for walking naked into a den of wolves. At least this way, if something goes wrong, I have the strength to protect what matters. And if taking such a host south is seen as an act of aggression? What if Robert thinks you're marching against him? Then Robert has forgotten who his friends are. And if he has, perhaps it's time he remembered. As the weeks pass, ravens fly to every corner of the north. From Bear Island to Last Hearth, from the Dreadfort to Deepwood Motte, the call goes out. The Stark banners are raised, and the north answers. Men leave their families and their hearths to gather beneath the grey walls of Winterfell. The courtyard fills with soldiers, the stables overflow with horses, and the surrounding fields bloom with campfires and tents. Soon, the greatest host, assembled in the north, since Aegon's conquest, begins its march south. 45,000 strong, they move like a grey tide across the landscape. At their head rides Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, his ice strapped across his back, and his daughters riding beside him under the protection of an army that could reshape the Seven Kingdoms. Behind them, ravens take flight, carrying news that will shake the foundations of every throne room from Old Town to King's Landing. The North has awakened, and it marches with steel in its hands and wolves in its heart. The game has changed, though few yet realize it. But they will soon enough, when the grey banners of the North darken the horizon outside the capital's walls. The raven arrives at King's Landing 3 days before dawn, its black wings cutting through the pre-morning darkness like an omen. The bird carries news that will shake the Red Keep to its foundations, though the sleepy guards who receive it understand nothing of its importance. By the time the sun rises over the capital's golden spires, the small leather scroll has found its way to the Master of Whisperers. Varys reads the message twice before setting it carefully on his desk. His soft hands smooth the parchment as his mind races through the implications. 45,000 northern soldiers, the largest host assembled since Robert's rebellion, all marching south under Stark banners. Interesting, he murmurs to the empty chamber. Most interesting indeed. Meanwhile, in the Tower of the Hand, Grand Maester Pycelle shuffles through his morning correspondence with trembling fingers. The old man's eyes widen as he reads the report from his contacts in the north. His breathing becomes labored as the full scope of what approaches begins to settle in his ancient mind. He reaches for parchment and quill with unusual urgency. There are letters to write, warnings to send. The Lannisters must know what comes for them. The small council chamber has seen many crises over the years, but the emergency session called that morning carries a weight that presses down on every man present. Robert Baratheon sits heavily in his chair, his massive frame barely contained by the ornate seat. His knuckles are white where they grip the armrests. 45,000, he says, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and concern. Ned's called the entire North to his banners. Lord Renly Baratheon shifts in his seat, his usual easy smile replaced by a frown of concentration. That's more men than fought at the Trident, Your Grace. What could possibly require such a force for a journey to court? Varys speaks in his honey-sweet voice, his hands folded serenely before him. Perhaps Lord Stark has heard troubling rumors about the capital's current atmosphere. A man of his experience might consider such precautions prudent. Cersei Lannister's green eyes flash with fury. She leans forward in her chair like a lioness preparing to strike. Precautions! This is an invasion in all but name. My father must be informed immediately. Your father already knows, Your Grace, Pycelle wheezes, his chain clinking as he shifts. I've sent ravens to Casterly Rock detailing the situation. Lord Tywin is surely preparing his response even now. Robert's fist crashes down on the table, making the wine cups jump. Response? What response? Ned Stark is my friend, my brother in all but blood. If he marches south with an army, he has his reasons. Friendship is a luxury kings cannot always afford, Cersei says coldly, especially when that friendship threatens the stability of the realm. Littlefinger speaks for the first time, his voice carrying its usual sardonic edge. Perhaps we're viewing this incorrectly. Lord Stark brings 45,000 swords to King's Landing. That's 45,000 men who could defend the capital if needed. Surely the crown benefits from such reinforcement. The silence that follows his words is deafening. Every person in the room understands the implication. The gold cloaks number barely 2,000 men. The royal guard consists of 7 knights. Against the force approaching from the north, King's Landing is essentially defenseless. Varys clears his throat delicately. I've taken the liberty of activating certain assets throughout the capital and beyond. We shall know Lord Stark's true intentions soon enough. His true intentions? Robert's voice rises to a roar. His true intentions are to serve his king as I've asked him to. By the 7, what's happened to all of you? Have you forgotten who won this throne? But even as the king defends his old friend, doubt gnaws at the edges of his mind. 45,000 men. It's a force large enough to take the capital, large enough to place anyone they choose on the Iron Throne. The thought chills him more than he cares to admit. Throughout King's Landing, news of the approaching army spreads like wildfire through the streets and markets. Merchants begin hoarding goods, knowing that such a massive force will strain every supply line in the region. Tavern keepers prepare for either siege or the greatest influx of customers in their lifetimes. In Flea Bottom, mothers clutch their children closer and bar their doors against the uncertainty that approaches. They remember the sack of King's Landing all too well, remember what armies do when they enter cities. The fact that these are northern soldiers offers little comfort to people who have learned that all armies bring death in their wake. Sir Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch, paces his headquarters like a caged animal. His 2,000 gold cloaks represent the capital's primary defense, and they might as well be armed with wooden swords for all the good they'll do against the northern host. He drafts urgent requests for reinforcement from the Reach, the Stormlands, anywhere that might send aid. But even as he writes, Slint knows the truth. By the time help arrives, whatever Ned Stark intends will already be accomplished. Across the city, in a brothel that serves as one of Littlefinger's many enterprises, Petter Baelish meets with a hooded figure who arrived under cover of darkness. The man wears the rough furs and leather of a northerner, but his eyes are sharp with intelligence that marks him as more than a simple scout. "Your lord is making quite an impression," Littlefinger says, pouring wine for his guest. The entire capital buzzes with speculation about his intentions. The northern man accepts the cup but doesn't drink. Lord Stark's intentions are his own business, but perhaps certain parties might benefit from understanding that the North remembers its friends and its enemies. A fascinating perspective, Littlefinger muses. And does the North consider the Crown a friend or an enemy? That remains to be seen, the man replies. Much depends on how the Crown receives Lord Stark's arrival. Meanwhile, in the bowels of the Red Keep, Varys's little birds sing their songs of secrets and whispers. Reports flow in from every corner of the capital and beyond. The Northern Army has crossed the neck with an efficiency that speaks of careful planning. They move not as raiders or conquerors, but as a disciplined force with clear objectives. This knowledge does nothing to calm the growing tension in the castle. In her chambers, Cersei Lannister paces before her window like a caged lioness. The view shows the Blackwater Bay stretching toward the horizon, toward the road where 45,000 northern soldiers approach with each passing hour. She has sent 3 ravens to her father at Casterly Rock, each more urgent than the last. Jaime finds her there as the sun sets behind the capital's skyline. The Kingslayer enters without announcement, as is his privilege as both brother and member of the King's Guard. "You're wearing a path in the stones," he observes, settling into a chair with his characteristic casual grace. "The Starks march on us with an army," Cersei snarls, "and our king welcomes them like honored guests. Have you forgotten what Ned Stark represents? What he might do if he learns the truth?" Jaime's expression grows serious. Ned Stark is honorable to a fault. If he meant us harm, he wouldn't announce his coming with 45,000 banners. He'd come quietly and strike without warning. Honor is a luxury that becomes dangerous when backed by overwhelming force, Cersei replies. "Father will come. He must come. The Westerlands can field 35,000 men if pressed. We'll meet Northern steel with Lannister gold and iron." But even as she speaks, Cersei knows the terrible arithmetic of the situation. Even if her father marches every man he can gather, they'll face a force that has already demonstrated its ability to move vast distances without losing cohesion. The North has awoken from its long slumber, and its wolf howl echoes across the entire realm. As night falls over King's Landing, the city transforms into a cauldron of rumor and speculation. Some say the Northern Army comes to conquer. Others whisper that civil war approaches, and the Starks march to settle old scores. A few dare to suggest that perhaps the realm's true problems lie not in the north, but in the very heart of the capital itself. The truth, as it often does, remains hidden behind the masks and games of those who hold power. But one fact stands clear above all the speculation and fear. The North has come to King's Landing, not as supplicants or visitors, but as a force that can reshape the balance of power in Westeros. And in the Red Keep, behind closed doors and whispered conversations, everyone begins to prepare for whatever storm approaches with the grey banners of House Stark. The sight that greets King's Landing at dawn defies every expectation and shatters every assumption about northern power. 45,000 men spread across the fields outside the capital, like a grey sea beneath the morning sun. Banners snap in the wind. The dire wolf of House Stark, the giant of House Umber, the flayed man of House Bolton, the merman of House Manderley. The camp stretches from the Gold Road to the Blackwater Rush, a temporary city of steel and canvas that dwarfs many permanent settlements. From the walls of the Red Keep, King Robert Baratheon watches his old friend's arrival with emotions that war within his chest. Admiration battles with unease as he counts the endless rows of spears and banners. Never in his reign has such a force approached his capital in peace. Never has he felt both so protected and so threatened by the same army. "By the Seven," he mutters to Ser Barristan Selmy, who stands beside him on the battlements. "Ned's brought half the north with him." "More than half, your grace," Ser Barristan replies grimly. "I've never seen such a host gathered under a single lord's banners." The gates of King's Landing open to admit the Lord of Winterfell and his immediate retinue. But the army remains in its disciplined camp beyond the walls. Ned Stark rides through the capital's streets with ice strapped across his back and 100 northern guards flanking his path. The common folk line the roads to watch, their faces mixing awe and terror as they witness this display of power. Sansa and Arya ride behind their father, their eyes wide as they take in the southern capital for the first time. But even the girls sense the tension that crackles through the air like lightning before a storm. This is not the triumphant homecoming of heroes. This is a reckoning. In the Red Keep's throne room, the small council gathers for what everyone knows will be no ordinary meeting. Ned Stark enters with steel in his grey eyes and winter in his bearing. The knowledge that 45,000 swords wait outside the capital's walls changes everything about the dynamics in the room. "Your Grace," Ned says, kneeling briefly before Robert. "I've come as you commanded." Robert's laugh booms through the chamber, but those who know him well detect the strain beneath it. "Commanded? 7 hells, Ned. I asked you to be my hand, not to conquer my kingdom." Ned rises, his gaze steady. "The realm is troubled, Robert. Jon Arryn's death, the whispers in every tavern, the debts that mount while your enemies grow bold. I thought it wise to arrive prepared for whatever I might find." The words hang heavy in the air. Cersei Lannister's green eyes narrow to slits, while Varys maintains his serene smile despite the calculation racing behind his eyes. Littlefinger leans back in his chair, fingers steepled as he assesses this new dynamic. "Prepared?" Grandmaster Pycelle wheezes. "Is that what we're calling it? My lord, surely such preparations were unnecessary." Ned's voice cuts through the air like a blade drawn from its sheath. "Were they? Tell me, Grandmaster, what precisely killed Jon Arryn? What illness struck down a man who had survived 40 years of war and politics?" The question lands like a thunderbolt. Pycelle's face grows ashen as he stumbles through an explanation about sudden illness and the unpredictable nature of aging. But his words carry no conviction, and everyone in the room knows it. "I want to see his body," Ned states flatly. "I want to speak with every maester who treated him, every servant who attended him in his final days. Jon Arryn was like a father to both Robert and me. His death deserves a proper investigation." "Ned," Robert begins, but his old friend's iron gaze silences him. "Furthermore," Ned continues, "I want access to the royal ledgers, all of them. Income, expenditures, debts and loans. If I'm to serve as hand, I need to understand the true state of the realm's finances." Littlefinger's smile grows razor-thin. "My lord, surely such detailed examinations can wait. The realm's finances are complex. It might be better to begin with simpler matters." "Nothing is simpler than the truth," Ned replies, "and nothing is more complex than lies meant to hide it." The meeting dissolves into tense discussions and carefully worded evasions, but the underlying reality remains unchanged. Ned Stark has arrived, not as a supplicant seeking favor, but as a lord with the power to demand answers. The Northern Army outside the walls ensures that his demands cannot be simply dismissed or deflected. Meanwhile, in the training yards of the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister receives word that Lord Stark wishes to speak with him. The summons carries an edge it never would have in different circumstances. When Jaime arrives, he finds Ned waiting with 6 northern guards, their hands resting casually on their sword hilts. "Sir Jaime," Ned greets him coldly, "we need to discuss my son." The words hit Jaime like a physical blow. Bran's fall from the broken tower of Winterfell had been carefully covered up, explained as a climbing accident. But the look in Ned Stark's eyes suggests that explanations will no longer suffice. "Your son's accident was tragic," Jaime begins carefully, "but accidents happen, especially with boys who love to climb." "Do they?" Ned's voice carries the chill of a northern winter. "My son fell from a tower he had climbed safely dozens of times before. He fell on the very day a certain golden-haired knight happened to be visiting Winterfell. Curious timing, wouldn't you say?" Jaime's hand moves instinctively toward his sword, but the presence of 6 northern warriors gives him pause. In any other circumstance, he might rely on his skill to fight his way clear, but not today. Not with an army outside the walls that would turn his death into a war. "Accusations require proof, my lord," Jaime says instead, "and proof is often harder to find than suspicion." "Then let us find that proof together," Ned replies grimly. "My son lies broken, but alive in Winterfell. If someone pushed him from that tower, they will answer for it. I promise you that." The threat hangs between them like a blade. Jaime recognizes that the game has changed fundamentally. The casual violence that once seemed so available is now constrained by the reality of northern power. Later that day, Robert Baratheon departs the Red Keep for what he claims will be a brief hunting expedition in the Kingswood. The king's hunts have become legendary for their excess, their wine, and their danger. This one follows the pattern, but with a crucial difference. 3 northern maesters ride with the royal party, along with a company of Stark soldiers who blend seamlessly with the king's guard. When Robert's hunting spear misses its mark and the wounded boar turns to charge, northern steel is ready to meet it. When the king's wine seems suspiciously strong for such an important hunt, northern eyes are watching. The king returns to the capital alive and largely unharmed, though his drinking leaves him weakened and thoughtful. The close calls that might have ended his reign instead serve as warnings that his life hangs by threads more fragile than he had imagined. That evening, in the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark sits surrounded by ledgers, reports, and documents that paint a picture of systematic corruption and staggering debt. The northern lords who serve as his advisors lean over the papers with growing alarm. 37 million gold dragons! The great Jon rumbles, his finger tracing the debt columns. How does a kingdom owe 37 million gold dragons? "By borrowing faster than it earns," Ned replies grimly, "and by spending faster than it borrows." Maester Luwin, who had accompanied the army south, adjusts his chain nervously. "My lord, debts this large don't occur by accident. Someone has been systematically bleeding the crown's resources." "The question is who?" Ned muses. "And why? And what they planned to do when the crown could no longer pay its obligations." A knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. A northern guard enters, his face grave with news. "My lord," he reports, "our watchers report suspicious activity in the Lannister quarters. Messages being burned, gold being moved. They're preparing for something." Ned nods grimly. The investigation has barely begun, but already it stirs reactions that confirm his darkest suspicions. Jon Arryn's death, Bran's fall, Robert's endangerment, the crown's mysterious debts. The pattern grows clearer with each passing hour. "Double the watch," he commands, "and send word to our camps. I want every captain ready for trouble. Whatever storm is coming, the North will weather it with steel in hand." Outside the walls of King's Landing, 45,000 northern soldiers settle into their evening routines. But their discipline remains sharp, their weapons ready. They have come south not as conquerors, but they are prepared to defend their lord and his mission with their lives. The Game of Thrones continues, but the rules have changed. For the first time in years, truth has an army at its back, and justice wears northern steel. The lions may roar, but the wolves have come south in numbers that cannot be ignored, and in the shadows of the Red Keep, those who have grown comfortable with lies and corruption begin to realize that their time of unchallenged power may be drawing to a close. The morning breaks grey and cold over King's Landing, fitting weather for the revelations that will shake the Seven Kingdoms to their foundations. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark sits across from a man whose very presence in the capital represents a shift in the balance of power that few yet comprehend. Stannis Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, has arrived during the night with a small but elite force and evidence that will change everything. Jon Arryn was thorough in his research, Stannis says, his voice carrying the harsh certainty that marks everything about Robert's younger brother. Perhaps too thorough for his own good. The documents spread across Ned's table, read like an indictment, written in blood and betrayal. Birth records, lineage charts, detailed observations of hair color and bone structure spanning 3 generations. Jon Arryn's investigation into Robert's bastards had been meticulous, and its conclusions are damning beyond any doubt. Ned runs his finger along the entries. Gendry, black of hair. Bara, black of hair. Maya Stone, black of hair. Every acknowledged bastard of Robert Baratheon bears the same dark locks. Baratheon seed is strong, Stannis states flatly. It has been for 300 years. Black hair, blue eyes, strong jaw. The bloodline breeds true without exception. The implications hang heavy in the air between them. Prince Joffrey's golden curls suddenly seem like an accusation rather than a mark of beauty. Princess Myrcella's green eyes tell a story no one at court has dared to speak aloud. Prince Tommen's soft features belong to no Baratheon who ever lived. Robert's children are not his children, Ned says, the words falling like stones into still water. Indeed, Stannis replies, and if Robert's children are not his children, then who rules when Robert dies? The answer stands before them, grim and uncompromising as winter itself. Stannis Baratheon, rightful heir to the Iron Throne, has come to claim what law and blood declare to be his. A knock at the door interrupts their conference. Sir Jory Cassel enters, his face grave with news that cannot wait. "My lord," he reports, "the gold cloaks have taken Grand Maester Pycelle into custody as you ordered. He waits in the dungeons for questioning." "And our other preparations?" Ned asks. "Complete. The Northern Guards have surrounded the Lannister quarters. No one enters or leaves without our knowledge." Stannis nods approvingly. "Your men work efficiently, Ned. Jon Arryn would have benefited from such protection." The implication is clear. Jon Arryn died because he learned what Ned and Stannis now know. He died because someone needed to silence him before the truth could spread. The hand who might have exposed the greatest deception in Westerosi history was murdered for his diligence. Pycelle first, Ned decides. Then we face the Queen with what we've discovered. The dungeons beneath the Red Keep have seen many prisoners over the years, but few have been questioned by Northern lords with the authority to demand truth from the most powerful men in the kingdom. Grand Maester Pycelle sits in his cell like a withered spider, his chains clinking as he shifts nervously on the cold stone. The great Yonumber fills the doorway like a mountain of muscle and steel, while Rickard Karstark stands with his arms crossed and his scarred face set in hard lines. Between them, Pycelle looks smaller than ever, his age and frailty magnified by the presence of men who have never learned to bow to southern nobility. "Tell us about Queen Cersei's children," Ned commands without preamble. Pycelle's watery eyes dart between the northern lords like a cornered rat seeking escape. "My lord, I don't understand. The Queen's children are the legitimate heirs to the throne." "Are they?" Rickard Karstark's voice carries the edge of a man who has seen through too many lies to tolerate another. "We have evidence that suggests otherwise." "Evidence?" Pycelle sputters. "What evidence could possibly suggest? That is to say, How could anyone question? The Great John leans forward, his massive frame blocking out the torchlight. Old man, my patience has limits. Start talking truth, or we'll find less gentle ways to encourage your memory. The threat works where courtesy failed. Pycelle's composure crumbles like parchment in flame. You don't understand, he whimpers. The Queen, her influence, what she might do if... The Queen's influence is somewhat diminished at present, Ned observes dryly. 45,000 northern swords tend to alter political calculations. Now answer the question. With trembling hands and a voice that cracks like breaking glass, Pycelle tells them what they already suspected, but needed to hear confirmed. The Queen's children are bastards born of incest. King Robert has no true-born heirs. The line of succession leads directly to Stannis Baratheon, and anyone who might have revealed this truth has met with unfortunate accidents. Jon Arryn, Pycelle whispers. He was asking the same questions, looking at the same records. I tried to warn him about the dangers of such investigations. Warn him? Ned's voice turns cold as winter. Or kill him? The tears of Lys leave no trace, Pycelle admits, his confession barely audible. A few drops in his wine, and the kingdom's greatest threat to stability was removed. I hoped it would end there. The silence that follows his words carries the weight of kingdoms. A hand of the king murdered for seeking truth. A realm built upon a lie that reaches to the very heart of the Iron Throne. The northern lords exchange glances that speak of justice, long delayed, but finally within reach. Meanwhile, in the Red Keep's royal quarters, Cersei Lannister paces her chambers like a caged lioness. The reports she receives grow more alarming with each passing hour. Pycelle arrested, Stark guards watching every exit. Her brother confined to his quarters under the pretense of protection during these troubled times. She summons her children with urgent whispers and careful lies. Joffrey comes first, his 12-year-old face already showing the cruel beauty that marks him as his father's son, though not the father the realm believes. Myrcella follows, green eyes wide with confusion at her mother's obvious distress. Tommen arrives last, sleepy and compliant as always. We're leaving, Cersei announces. Tonight. There are horses waiting, guards prepared. We'll sail for Casterly Rock and safety. But even as she speaks, Cersei knows the futility of her plans. The northern army surrounds the capital like a steel trap. Every road, every ship, every possible escape route lies under the watch of men who serve Ned Stark's iron justice. Joffrey's petulant voice cuts through her fears. Why should we flee? I am a prince of the realm. Let them try to stop us. Because, my beautiful boy, Cersei says, her voice breaking with emotions she dare not name, there are some truths that kingdoms cannot survive. The attempt to flee comes at midnight, as Cersei always knew it would. A dozen guards loyal to Lannister gold lead her children through forgotten passages toward the Blackwater Rush, where a ship waits to carry them beyond Ned Stark's reach. The plan might have succeeded in different times, against different foes. But northern soldiers have been watching, waiting, preparing for exactly this moment. The escape party finds their path blocked by men who fight like wolves and show mercy only when it serves justice. The brief conflict that follows ends with Lannister guards surrendered or fled, and the Queen's children returned to their quarters under what everyone politely calls protection. In the throne room, King Robert Baratheon sits upon the Iron Throne with a cup of wine in his hand and devastation in his eyes. The evidence lies spread before him like pieces of a shattered life. Birth records, witness testimonies, the confession of his own Grand Maester. The children he believed to be his legacy, the heirs he planned to leave his kingdom, are revealed as the products of his wife's betrayal. Joffrey, he says, his voice barely above a whisper, my boy, my firstborn son. He was never your son, Stannis states with brutal honesty. None of them were. The Queen has played you for a fool these 16 years. Robert's famous temper, the rage that once broke rebel armies and shattered the Targaryen dynasty, remains strangely absent. Instead, there is only grief for the family he thought he had, and the kingdom he thought he would leave behind. "What happens now?" Robert asks, though his voice suggests he already knows the answer. Ned steps forward, his face grave with the weight of necessary justice. The Queen and her brother must answer for their crimes. The children, they are innocents in this deception, but they cannot inherit what was never theirs to claim. Stannis is your lawful heir, as he has always been. "Stannis," Robert says, looking at his younger brother with eyes that hold decades of complicated history, "you would be king." "I would serve the realm as law demands," Stannis replies, "as duty requires, as justice demands." The transfer of power that follows happens not with sword and fire, but with documents and seals and the terrible weight of revealed truth. Stannis Baratheon is declared heir apparent, to rule when Robert's time ends. The Northern Army ensures that this declaration carries the force of law rather than mere hope. In the hours that follow, ravens fly to every corner of the Seven Kingdoms, carrying news that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros. The Queen's children are bastards. Prince Stannis is the rightful heir. The North stands ready to enforce this new reality with steel and blood if necessary. The Game of Thrones has reached a moment of terrible clarity, where lies collapse beneath the weight of truth and kingdoms must choose between the comfort of deception and the harsh demands of justice. And in King's Landing, surrounded by the grey banners of House Stark, that choice is no longer optional. The wolves have come south not just with swords, but with truth itself. And truth, as many are about to discover, can be the most dangerous weapon of all. The dawn that breaks over King's Landing brings with it the sound of war drums and the glint of steel that stretches across the horizon like a golden sea. Tywin Lannister has come to reclaim his family's honor, and he brings with him the full might of the Westerlands. 35,000 men march beneath the crimson banners of House Lannister, their armor gleaming in the morning sun like the scales of some great dragon. From the walls of the Red Keep, Ned Stark watches the Lannister host deploy across the fields south of the capital. The old lion has positioned his forces with the tactical brilliance that made him legendary during Robert's rebellion. Heavy cavalry on the wings, disciplined infantry in the center, crossbowmen positioned to rain death from carefully chosen high ground. "He's good," the great Jon Umber admits grudgingly, his massive hands gripping the stone battlements. "I'll give the old bastard that much. He knows how to arrange an army for killing." Knowing how to arrange them and knowing how to use them are different things, Ned replies, and he's never faced the full strength of the North in open battle. Below them in the courtyard, the Northern Army prepares for war with the methodical efficiency that has made them feared throughout Westeros. 45,000 men check their weapons, adjust their armor, and prepare to fight for something greater than gold or glory. They fight for justice, for truth, and for the Lord who brought them south to set the realm right. Meanwhile, in the dungeons of the Red Keep, Jaime Lannister strains against the chains that bind him to the cold stone wall. The sound of his father's war horns echoes through the castle like a promise of rescue. But rescue remains frustratingly beyond reach. The Northern Guards who watch him are disciplined professionals who show no mercy to Lannister gold or charm. "My father comes," he tells his captors, his voice carrying the arrogant confidence that has marked his entire life. "You'd be wise to release me before his army reaches these walls." Sir Jory Cassell, commanding the guard detail, shakes his head grimly. "Your father can come with 100,000 men, sir. You're not leaving that cell until Lord Stark decides otherwise." The sound of steel on steel begins to ring across the fields as the two armies close to fighting distance. The northern host moves like a grey tide, their wolf banners snapping in the wind as they advance, with the deadly precision of men who have trained together for years. At their head rides Ned Stark himself, ice strapped across his back and justice burning in his grey eyes. Tywin Lannister meets them with equal resolve, his crimson cloak flowing behind him as he spurs his destrier forward. The Lord of Casterly Rock has never lost a battle, never retreated from an enemy, never shown mercy to those who threaten his family. Today will be no different, or so he believes. The clash, when it comes, shakes the very ground beneath King's Landing. 45,000 northern soldiers crash into 35,000 Westerland troops with a sound like thunder torn from the heavens. Steel rings against steel, men scream and die, and the fields outside the capital become a churning sea of blood and mud. The great Jon Umber leads the northern left wing with the fury of a mountain storm. His massive sword cleaves through Lannister shields like they were made of parchment, while his mountain clansmen follow behind him, howling war cries that chill the blood. Against them, Sir Adam Marbrand rallies the Lannister cavalry with desperate courage, but courage alone cannot stand against the tide of northern steel. On the right wing, Rose Bolton commands with cold precision that matches Tywin's own tactical brilliance. The Dreadfoot men advance in perfect formation, their spears creating a wall of death that no cavalry charge can break. Behind them, the longbowmen of House Mormont rain arrows down on the Lannister ranks with deadly accuracy. In the centre, where the main battle rages, Rickard Karstark and Mage Mormont coordinate their forces like the veteran commanders they are. The northern infantry pushes forward step by bloody step, their discipline holding firm even as Lannister gold cloaks try to break their line with desperate charges. But it is in the Red Keep itself that some of the day's most crucial moments unfold. As the battle rages outside, Sandor Clegane finds himself guarding Sansa Stark in the royal apartments. The young girl watches from her window as men die for causes she barely understands, her blue eyes wide with terror at the violence below. "Stay away from the window, little bird." The hound growls, his scarred face twisted with emotions he cannot name. War is no sight for gentle eyes. But even as he speaks, chaos erupts in the corridor outside. Lannister loyalists among the castle guard have decided to seize hostages while the battle still rages. They burst through the doors with swords drawn, led by Sir Meryn Trant and a half-dozen men who believe they can turn the tide of war with a few well-placed threats. "Step aside, dog," Sir Meryn commands. "The girl comes with us." For a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, Sandor Clegane stands frozen between loyalties that have defined his entire life. He has served House Lannister faithfully, protected their interests, obeyed their commands without question. But something in Sansa Stark's frightened eyes awakens a part of him that he thought had died long ago. "No," he says quietly, his hand moving to his sword hilt. "I don't think she does." The fight that follows is brief but vicious. The hound is outnumbered 6-1, but he fights with the fury of a man who has finally found something worth protecting. His sword opens Sir Meryn's throat with a single stroke, while his fists and feet deal death to men who thought themselves safe behind castle walls. When the northern guards arrive, drawn by the sounds of combat, they find Sandor Clegane standing over 6 dead men with Sansa Stark safe behind him. Blood drips from his blade, but his scarred face shows something that might almost be peace. Outside the capital, the battle reaches its climax as Tywin Lannister finds himself face to face with Ned Stark in personal combat. The two lords circle each other like wolves, their swords gleaming in the afternoon sun as armies clash around them. Tywin fights with the cold precision that has made him feared throughout Westeros, while Ned matches him stroke for stroke with the deadly skill that made him Robert's most trusted general. "You should have stayed in your frozen wasteland," Tywin snarls as their blades lock together. "The South is no place for northern honor." "Perhaps," Ned replies grimly, "but it's past time the South remembered what northern justice looks like." The The duel might have continued until one or both men fell from exhaustion, but it ends when a crossbow bolt takes Tywin's destrier in the neck. The great warhorse goes down screaming, pinning its rider beneath its weight and leaving the Lord of Casterly Rock helpless before his enemies. Ned Stark stands over his fallen opponent, with ice pointed at the old lion's throat. Around them, the Lannister army begins to crumble as word spreads that their commander has fallen. Men throw down their weapons and raise their hands in surrender, recognizing that the day is lost beyond all hope of recovery. "Yield," Ned commands, his voice carrying across the battlefield like the toll of a funeral bell. Tywin Lannister, pinned beneath his dead horse with northern steel at his throat, looks up at his captor with eyes that burn with fury and something that might be respect. "I yield," he says through gritted teeth. "But this isn't over, Stark. My family's honor demands satisfaction." "Your family's honor died with their lies," Ned replies. "What happens next depends on whether you choose justice or vengeance." The battle's end comes not with a great charge or heroic sacrifice, but with the simple mathematics of defeat. Surrounded, outnumbered, and leaderless, the Lannister forces surrender in groups that quickly become a flood. By sunset, 30,000 Westerland soldiers sit in makeshift prison camps under Northern Guard, while their golden banners lie trampled in the mud. In the Red Keep, King Robert Baratheon watches the aftermath of the greatest battle in a generation from his throne room window. The stress of recent days, combined with years of drinking and excess, has taken a terrible toll on his massive frame. His breathing comes in labored gasps, and his face has taken on the grey pallor of a man whose heart struggles with each beat. "Is it over?" he asks Ned, who has returned to report the victory. "The battle is over," Ned confirms. "Tywin Lannister is our prisoner. His army is scattered or captured. The threat to your throne has ended." Robert nods slowly, then sags back in his chair, as if the weight of kingship has finally become too much to bear. "Good," he whispers. "That's good. Stannis, where is my brother?" "Here, your grace," Stannis replies, stepping forward from the shadows where he had been waiting. "The realm is secure. Justice has been done." Then it's time," Robert says, his voice growing weaker with each word. "The crown, it's yours now, brother. Rule better than I did. Rule with honor." King Robert Baratheon dies as the sun sets over his capital, surrounded by the men who fought to preserve his throne, but knowing that its future lies in worthier hands. His last words are lost in the labored breathing that finally stops, leaving behind a kingdom transformed and a crown that passes to the man best suited to wear it. Within the hour, Stannis Baratheon is declared King of the Seven Kingdoms by right of blood and law. The Northern Army provides the steel to ensure this declaration carries force, while the captured Lannister lords provide the witnesses to swear that justice has been done according to the ancient laws of Westeros. The Game of Thrones has reached its conclusion for this generation, decided not by scheming or poison or assassins in the night, but by honest steel wielded in service of truth. The North has come south and changed everything, proving that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones most worth fighting. The great Sept of Baelor has witnessed many ceremonies over the centuries, but none quite like the coronation that takes place on this grey morning in King's Landing. King Stannis Baratheon stands before the altar with the crown of kings upon his brow, but the ceremony carries none of the joy that traditionally marks such occasions. This is not a celebration, but a reckoning, the formal conclusion of justice long delayed. Ned Stark kneels before his new king to accept the golden handpin that marks him as Hand of the King once more. But the dynamics have shifted in ways that would have seemed impossible mere weeks ago. The Northern Army that still camps outside the capital serves as a constant reminder that this reign begins with unprecedented strength behind it. "Rise, Lord Hand," Stannis commands, his voice carrying the stern authority that has always marked his character. The realm has need of northern justice in these troubled times. But even as the coronation proceeds, darker business awaits in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep. The trials that will determine the fate of House Lannister begin within hours of the new king's crowning, and they carry the weight of deciding whether mercy or justice will define this new reign. Tywin Lannister stands in chains before a tribunal that includes King Stannis, Hand Ned Stark, and representatives from every major northern house. The Lord of Casterly Rock has lost none of his pride, despite his circumstances, his grey eyes burning with defiance, even as the evidence of his family's crimes mounts like stones upon a grave. "You stand accused of treason," Stannis declares, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "Your daughter committed adultery with your son, producing bastard children who were passed off as heirs to the Iron Throne. Your family murdered the previous Hand when he discovered this deception. How do you answer these charges?" Tywin's response carries the cold arrogance that has defined his entire life. "I answer that, bastards or not, my grandchildren were raised as princes and princess of the realm. I answer that Jon Arryn was a meddling fool who threatened the stability of the Seven Kingdoms with his investigations. And I answer that I regret nothing save the fact that I was not more thorough in protecting my family's interests." The words seal his fate more completely than any confession could. Ned Stark speaks the formal sentence with the same grim finality he once brought to bear on enemies of the realm. "Tywin Lannister, for the crimes of treason, murder, and conspiracy against the crown, I sentence you to death." But it is the trial of Queen Cersei that draws the largest crowds to the Red Keep's Great Hall. The woman who once ruled as queen now stands in chains before the assembled lords of Westeros, her golden hair unkempt and her green eyes blazing with fury that has not dimmed despite her fall from grace. "You bore bastards and presented them as legitimate heirs," Stannis charges, his words carrying the weight of formal justice. "You corrupted the succession, endangered the realm, and murdered those who threatened to expose your deceptions. What defense do you offer?" Cersei's response rings through the hall with the desperate passion of a mother fighting for her children's lives. "I did what any mother would do to protect her children. I loved them, raised them, prepared them to rule. That they are not Robert's blood matters nothing beside the fact that they are mine. And yet by law, bastards cannot inherit," Ned observes grimly. "By passing them off as true-born heirs, you committed treason against every law that governs succession in Westeros." The former queen's composure finally breaks as the full weight of her situation becomes clear. "Then kill me," she snarls, "but spare my children. They are innocents in all of this. Punish me for the choices I made, but let them live in exile, rather than die for sins they did not commit." The plea creates uncomfortable silence in the Great Hall. Many of the assembled lords have children of their own, and the thought of condemning boys and girls for their parents' crimes sits uneasily with men who pride themselves on honor. It is young Tyrion Lannister who provides the most heartbreaking testimony of all. Captured with his father's army and brought to trial alongside his family members, the dwarf lord speaks with desperate eloquence on behalf of his condemned relatives. "My father is a hard man," he admits, his voice carrying across the hall despite his small stature. "My sister is proud and ruthless, but they acted from love of family, not from hatred of the realm. Surely there is room for mercy and justice, room for exile rather than execution." His words might have swayed a different king in different circumstances, but Stannis Baratheon has never been known for mercy, and the magnitude of the Lannister deceptions demands a response that will echo through history. "The law is the law," Stannis declares with final authority. "Those who break it must face the consequences, regardless of their motivations or the pleas made on their behalf." The executions that follow are conducted with the grim efficiency that marks all of Stannis' decisions. Tywin Lannister dies with the same cold dignity he showed in life, his last words a curse upon the enemies who brought down his house. Cersei Lannister screams her defiance until the headsman's axe silences her forever, her final thoughts reserved for the children she will never see grow to adulthood. But it is the execution of Prince Joffrey that creates the most controversy throughout the realm. The boy king who never was meets his death with the petulant fury that marked his entire short life, his golden curls stained with blood as justice finally catches up with the lies that sustained his claim to power. "You're killing an innocent child," Tyrion cries as his nephew is led to the block. "Whatever his parentage, he's still just a boy who believed himself to be a prince." "A boy who would have ruled as a tyrant," Ned replies grimly. "A boy whose very existence threatened the lawful succession of the realm. Some truths are too dangerous to let live." The reactions to these executions vary dramatically across the Seven Kingdoms. In the north, men nod approvingly at the justice of it all, satisfied that honor has finally triumphed over deception. In the Reach and the Stormlands, lords wrestle with the harsh necessities of preventing future civil wars. In Dorne, Prince Doran Martell receives the news with satisfaction that the Lannisters have finally paid for their crimes. But perhaps the most significant reaction comes from across the Narrow Sea, where Daenerys Targaryen receives ravens bearing news that will reshape her own plans for reclaiming her family's throne. The Dragon Queen sits in her tent beside the Dothraki Sea, her silver hair gleaming in the firelight as she reads reports of the changed political landscape in Westeros. "The usurper king is dead," she muses to Ser Jorah Mormont, who stands beside her, with his own thoughts racing. "His false dynasty crumbles beneath the weight of its own lies. Perhaps this is the opportunity we have been waiting for." "The North now holds sway in King's Landing," Ser Jorah observes carefully. "Stannis Baratheon rules, but with Ned Stark as his hand and a northern army to enforce his will, they may prove more formidable foes than Robert ever was." Back in King's Landing, the new political order begins to take shape with surprising speed. Sansa Stark finds herself at the center of marriage negotiations, designed to cement alliances between the great houses. Her betrothal to the heir of House Manderley strengthens northern control over the eastern coast, while also providing her with a husband who values honor above gold. "You will be happy with him," Catelyn tells her daughter as they discuss the arranged marriage. "Wylis Manderley is a good man, from an honorable house. Your children will know safety and love." Arya, meanwhile, discovers that the new regime offers opportunities that would have been unthinkable under Robert's rule. The reformed City Watch, now commanded by Northern officers, begins training programs that welcome willing recruits, regardless of birth or gender. The young Stark girl throws herself into sword training with an enthusiasm that would have scandalized the previous court. "Let her learn," Ned tells his wife when Catelyn expresses concerns about their daughter's unconventional education. "The realm has changed, and our children must be prepared for the world we're creating, not the one we inherited." Throughout the capital, ravens carry news of the new order to every corner of Westeros. Stannis Baratheon rules by right of law and blood, supported by the military might of the North and the stern justice that has always marked his character. The age of lies and deception has ended, replaced by a regime that values truth above convenience and justice above mercy. Yet even as the new order establishes itself, wise men know that challenges lie ahead. In Essos, dragons grow larger with each passing day. In the free cities, exiled lords plot their return to power. And somewhere in the ruins of House Lannister's former glory, seeds of vengeance wait for the right moment to bloom. The Game of Thrones never truly ends. It merely changes players and rules, forever testing whether justice can triumph over ambition, whether honor can survive the corrupting influence of power. For now the North has shown that steel, wielded in service of truth, can reshape kingdoms. But winter is coming, as it always does, and with it challenges that will test whether this new order can survive the storms ahead. Across the Narrow Sea, the great Khalasar of Khal Drogo moves like a brown tide across the Dothraki Sea. But this morning brings news that will reshape the plans of every ambitious soul, from Pentos to the ruins of old Valyria. Ravens have crossed the water, carrying word of the fall of House Lannister and the rise of King Stannis, supported by the grey banners of the north. Daenerys Targaryen sits in her magnificent pavilion, her violet eyes scanning the parchment that has travelled so far to reach her. Around her, advisors and allies debate the implications of these distant events with the intensity of scholars dissecting prophecy. The usurper's line crumbles, Ser Jorah Mormont observes, his scarred face thoughtful as he considers the political ramifications. Robert Baratheon is dead, his supposed heirs exposed as bastards and executed. Perhaps this chaos creates the opportunity you've been waiting for, Khaleesi. Viserys Targaryen paces the tent like a caged dragon, his silver hair gleaming in the lamplight, as excitement builds in his pale eyes. The realm tears itself apart while we grow stronger. My sister's dragons grow larger with each passing day, and now our enemies destroy themselves. It's perfect. But Daenerys herself remains thoughtful, her hand resting on the scaled hide of Drogon as the black dragon coils around her shoulders. Is it opportunity or is it danger? She muses. This Stannis Baratheon rules with northern steel at his back. They've proven capable of destroying the most powerful house in Westeros. What does that tell us about their strength? Illyrio Mopatis, who has travelled from Pentos to witness these developments firsthand, spreads maps across the low table with his jewelled fingers. The political landscape has shifted dramatically, Your Grace. The old alliances that kept Robert's regime stable no longer exist, but new ones have formed that may prove even more formidable. Meanwhile, in the distant north, Jon Snow stands atop the wall and watches ravens arrive from the south, bearing news that fills his heart with complex emotions. His father has triumphed, justice has been served, and the realm has been set right through northern steel and northern honor. Yet the bastard son of Winterfell will never see these victories firsthand, bound as he is by oath and duty to the Night's Watch. Your father's done something remarkable down there, Samwell Tarly observes, reading over the reports that detail the fall of House Lannister. The entire realm speaks of northern justice and stark honor. Jon's smile carries both pride and sadness as he considers how much the world has changed since he took the Black. He's always been a man of honor. I'm not surprised he found a way to make it work in King's Landing, even if it required an army to do it. Do you think he'll come north? Sam asks hopefully. Perhaps visit the Wall now that his duties as Hand are complete? The Wall doesn't receive visits from the hand of the king, Jon replies, and duty keeps him in the south as surely as it keeps us here. But knowing he's succeeded, knowing the realm is in better hands, that's enough. Far to the south, in the sun-drenched halls of Sunspear, Prince Doran Martell receives the news of Lannister downfall with satisfaction that runs deeper than the deepest well. The man who has waited years for justice for his sister's murder finally sees his patience rewarded, even if the justice comes from unexpected hands. Tywin Lannister is dead, he tells his brother Oberyn, who has returned from his travels to hear the remarkable reports from King's Landing. The Mountain's master has paid the price for Elya's murder. Prince Oberyn's dark eyes burn with emotions that have simmered for 15 years. Northern steel accomplished what Dornish patience could not. Perhaps there is something to be said for direct action, after all. Perhaps, Doran agrees. But the question now becomes whether we support this new king or remain neutral as events unfold. Stannis Baratheon was not responsible for our sister's death, but he was Robert's brother. How much forgiveness can Dorne offer? The debate that follows echoes in councils throughout Westeros as lords and ladies attempt to navigate the new political reality. In the Vale, Lady Lysa Arryn faces pressure from her bannermen to formally recognize the new king who has avenged her husband's murder. The lords of the Vale remember Jon Arryn's service to the realm, and they approve of justice finally being done for his death. King Stannis has proven himself worthy of our support, Lord Jon Royce declares before the assembled knights of the Vale. He has brought the king's justice to those who murdered our lord. Honor demands that we acknowledge his rightful claim. In King's Landing itself, the northern lords debate whether their great gamble has run its course, or whether greater challenges lie ahead. The great Jon Umber speaks for many when he questions how long the North can maintain its southern presence. "We've done what we came to do," he argues during a council meeting in the Tower of the Hand. "Justice has been served. The realm has been set right. Perhaps it's time for some of us to return home to prepare for winter." But Ned Stark shakes his head, his grey eyes focused on maps that show the greater threats still facing the realm. "Our work has only begun. Stannis needs time to consolidate his rule, to build alliances, to prepare for the challenges that will come. The North's support cannot be withdrawn too quickly." "And what of our own lands?" Mage Mormont asks pointedly. "Bear Island needs its lady, just as every northern house needs its lord. How long can we stay away from our duties at home?" It is Rose Bolton who provides the most practical answer, his pale eyes calculating as always. "Half the army returns north to prepare for winter and guard our lands. Half remains to ensure King Stannis' rule is secure. We rotate commands every 6 months, ensuring both duties are fulfilled." The solution satisfies most, but it highlights the ongoing tension between northern identity and southern responsibilities that will define much of the new regime. Into this complex political landscape arrives a figure who will reshape the religious dynamics of the new kingdom. Melisandre of Ashai steps from a ship at King's Landing's harbour, like a vision from prophecy, her red robes billowing in the sea breeze, and her ruby necklace catching the light like captured fire. "I have come to serve the one true king," she declares to the harbour guards, her voice carrying an otherworldly authority that makes hardened soldiers step aside. "R'hllor has shown me visions of the righteous ruler who will lead Westeros through the darkness ahead." Her arrival creates immediate controversy in a kingdom that has always worshipped the Seven or the old gods of the North. But Stannis Baratheon, never a man to reject useful tools, grants her audience despite the concerns of his advisers. "You speak of visions and prophecy," he tells her during their first meeting. "I deal in law and justice. What can your red god offer a kingdom that runs on practical governance?" "Purpose," Melisandre replies, her red eyes seeming to burn with inner fire. "Direction in the dark times ahead. For winter comes, your grace, and with it threats that armies alone cannot defeat. The North has served you well with steel and honor. Allow the Lord of Light to serve you with fire and truth." Meanwhile, the economic recovery that follows political stability begins to show itself throughout the realm. Merchants who had hoarded goods during the uncertainty now release them to markets starved for supplies. Trade routes that had been disrupted by the threat of civil war reopen as word spreads that the new regime values commerce and stability. In the taverns of King's Landing, merchants from across the known world gather to assess new opportunities. The Northern Army's discipline has ended the petty corruption that plagued trade under Robert's rule, while Stannis' reputation for honesty makes contracts and agreements more reliable than they have been in years. "Business is good," observes a merchant from Tyrosh, counting coins that represent successful ventures. "This new king pays his debts and keeps his word. After Robert's chaos and the Lannister debt crisis, it's refreshing to deal with honest governance." Back across the narrow sea, these reports of stability and strength reach Daenerys Targaryen as she continues her own preparations for eventual conquest. The dragon eggs that were her wedding gifts have hatched into creatures of legend, their wings spreading wider with each passing day as they grow into instruments of war, unlike any the world has seen in centuries. The realm grows stronger under this new king, she admits to her council, but dragons grow stronger as well. When the time comes to reclaim my family's throne, We will face them with fire and blood, as Targaryens always have. The Game of Thrones continues to evolve, but the pieces on the board have shifted dramatically. Where once Robert's regime relied on the uneasy balance between competing factions, Stannis rules with the unified support of the North and the grudging respect of kingdoms that value justice over convenience. Yet challenges remain on every horizon. In Essos, dragons prepare for war. Beyond the wall, winter gathers its strength. And in the hearts of ambitious men and women throughout Westeros, new plots begin to form around the question of whether this new order can survive the tests that lie ahead. The North has proven that honor can triumph over deception, that justice can prevail over convenience. But the true test of any dynasty lies not in its birth, but in its survival. And that test has only just begun. In the deepest chambers beneath the Red Keep, where shadows gather like conspiracies and whispers echo through stone corridors that have witnessed centuries of secrets, Varys the Spider adapts to serve a new master with the fluid grace that has kept him alive through 3 kings. His network of little birds sings different songs now, but their voices remain as valuable as ever. The Northern Lords trust actions more than words, he tells his assembled spies during one of their clandestine meetings. King Stannis values results over flattery, and Lord Stark prizes honor above cleverness. Adjust your methods accordingly. The transition has not been seamless. Many of Varys's former assets were compromised by their association with the Lannisters, their loyalties bought with gold that now sits in northern coffers. But the Spider has survived worse purges, and his talent for reinvention serves him well in these changed times. "What of Littlefinger?" asks one of his agents, a young woman whose innocent face conceals a mind sharp as Valyrian steel. Lord Baelish struggles to find his footing in a world where chaos no longer climbs ladders, Varys replies, with something approaching satisfaction. His greatest strength has become his greatest weakness, now that the realm values stability over discord. Indeed, in his modest chambers in the Red Keep, Petyr Baelish paces like a caged wolf, his quick mind racing through schemes and stratagems that might restore his influence in a court that no longer prizes his particular talents. The brothels that once provided him with information and income now operate under northern supervision. The financial manipulations that built his power base have been replaced by stark honesty and Baratheon efficiency. "The old game is over," he mutters to himself, fingers drumming against a ledger that shows his diminished holdings. But every end creates a beginning for those clever enough to see it. His desperate plans take shape slowly, built around the few assets that remain beyond northern reach. Letters travel to Lysa Arryn in the Vale, to ambitious lordlings in the Reach, to anyone who might provide leverage in a realm that seems determined to value virtue over cunning. Meanwhile, across the narrow sea, in the great trading city of Pentos, merchant princes gather in perfumed chambers to debate the implications of Westeros's changed political landscape. The fall of House Lannister has disrupted trade relationships that took decades to establish, while the rise of northern power creates both opportunities and uncertainties. "The new king pays his debts," observes Magister Illyrio Moppatis, his jeweled fingers tracing patterns on silk maps. But his hand questions every contract, examines every arrangement. They bring northern honesty to southern commerce, and honestly may not always serve our interests. "Honesty is expensive," agrees another merchant prince, a thin man whose wealth comes from dealings that prefer shadows to sunlight. Robert's court could be bought with gold and wine. This new regime demands value for payment and questions the source of every coin. But not all the merchant princes view these changes as problematic. Some see opportunity in the stability that northern steel brings to Westeros politics. Trade thrives when kingdoms remain peaceful, and peace seems more likely under rulers who value justice over personal enrichment. In the ancient city of Braavos, where the Iron Bank's vaults hold the debts of kingdoms and the promises of kings, the keyholders gather to reassess their relationship with the Westerosi crown. The massive debts accumulated under Robert's rule remain, but the new regime's approach to financial obligations differs dramatically from their predecessors. Stannis Baratheon has requested a complete audit of the Crown's obligations, reports Tycho Nestoris, his precise voice carrying through the marble halls where financial empires rise and fall. He wishes to understand exactly what the realm owes, and to whom. This represents either great opportunity or great danger for our institution. Robert borrowed without plan or purpose, observes another banker. His hand spent money like water, while his master of coin built debt upon debt. But this new regime questions every expenditure and demands justification for every loan. They may prove more reliable debtors, but also more demanding ones. The bank's decision to extend cautious support to the new regime while maintaining traditional neutrality reflects their careful approach to political change. Money, after all, has no loyalty save to those who handle it wisely. Far to the south, in the ancient city of Old Town, where knowledge gathers like morning mist around the towering high tower, the archmeisters of the citadel debate the implications of recent events with the intensity that scholars bring to questions of cosmic importance. The political upheaval in King's Landing represents more than mere dynastic change. It challenges fundamental assumptions about power and governance. The Northern Army achieved in months what diplomacy failed to accomplish in years, observes Archmaester Walgrave during one of their lengthy councils. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of direct action compared to subtle manipulation. Or perhaps, counters Archmaester Marwyn, his scarred face thoughtful in the lamplight, we have overestimated the complexity of problems that can be solved with honest steel and determined justice. Not every crisis requires elaborate schemes when simple truth will suffice. The debate reflects broader questions about the Citadel's role in a realm that seems less interested in clever advisors and more focused on honorable action. Some Meisters worry about their diminished influence, while others see opportunity to serve rulers who value knowledge for its own sake, rather than as a tool for manipulation. In King's Landing itself, the cultural transformation that began with the Northern Army's arrival continues to reshape the capital's character in ways both subtle and profound. The brothels and gambling dens that thrived under Robert's permissive rule find themselves operating under stricter oversight. The casual corruption that once greased the wheels of court business has been replaced by northern efficiency and stark honesty. The city feels different, observes Sir Davos Seaworth, now serving as one of Stannis's most trusted advisors. Cleaner, somehow. Less desperate. People walk the streets without constantly watching for cutpurses and con men. The change extends beyond mere law enforcement. Northern customs begin to influence southern practices as Stark retainers integrate with the existing court structure. The Godswood becomes a place of genuine reverence, rather than mere decoration, while the values of personal honor and direct speech slowly replace the elaborate courtesies that often concealed southern deception. Marriage negotiations that once centered on political advantage and financial gain now emphasize compatibility and honor. When Lord Wyman Manderley arrives to formalize his son's betrothal to Sansa Stark, the discussions focus on mutual respect and shared values rather than dowries and territorial concessions. "We offer friendship," Lord Manderley states simply. "Our houses have bled together, fought together, triumphed together. Let our children's marriage seal bonds forged in steel rather than gold." The approach appeals to Ned Stark, whose own marriage to Catelyn began with political necessity, but grew into genuine love through shared trials and mutual respect. The northern way of conducting such alliances begins to influence similar negotiations throughout the realm. But even as the South adapts to northern influence, challenges emerge that test the new regime's reach and authority. Beyond the wall, where ancient threats stir in the endless winter, increased wildling activity puts pressure on the Night's Watch that filtered south through ravens and reports from Lord Commander Mormont. The free folk mass in numbers not seen in living memory, reads one dispatch that reaches Ned's desk. Something drives them toward the wall with a desperation that goes beyond mere raiding. They speak of things in the far north, of threats that make even wildlings seek shelter among their southern enemies. The reports create uncomfortable questions about the realm's northern defenses at a time when significant military resources remain committed to southern politics. Jon Snow's letters provide more detail but no comfort, describing wildling tribes fleeing southward in terror of something they refuse to name. "Winter comes," Ned reads aloud from one of his son's messages. "But perhaps not the winter we expected. The old stories speak of long nights and ancient evils. I pray these are merely tales meant to frighten children, but the fear in these wildlings' eyes suggests otherwise." In the free cities of Essos, exiled Westerosi lords who fled the kingdom during the purges begin to organize around shared grievances and mutual desperation. Men who once served Robert now find themselves dependent on foreign charity, their lands confiscated, and their titles stripped by the new regime's systematic justice. "We could return," suggests one former knight over wine in a Tyroshi tavern. "Gather sellswords, purchase ships, land on the western coast while their attention focuses on King's Landing." But such schemes founder on practical realities. The Northern Army's reputation for efficiency extends to their intelligence gathering, while the new regime's popularity among common folk makes finding local support unlikely. Exile, it seems, may prove permanent for those who chose the wrong side in the Game of Thrones. Back in King's Landing, as autumn deepens toward winter, the new order settles into routines that suggest permanence rather than temporary change. King Stannis rules with the stern justice that has always marked his character, while Hand Ned Stark provides the moral authority that gives harsh decisions the weight of righteousness. The transformation of Westeros continues, driven by Northern steel and Stark honor, but guided by the recognition that lasting change requires more than military victory. It demands the patient work of building institutions, establishing precedents, and proving that justice can indeed triumph over expedience when backed by the will to enforce it. The Game of Thrones has not ended, but its rules have fundamentally changed. In this new Westeros, truth matters more than cleverness, honor outweighs gold, and the long-term stability of the realm takes precedence over short-term advantage. Whether this transformation can survive the challenges ahead remains to be seen. But for now, the North has shown that even the most corrupt systems can be reformed when enough good men choose to act with sufficient force. On the iron-black shores of Pike, where the waves crash against ancient stones like the heartbeat of a restless god, Balon Greyjoy stands before the Seastone chair and contemplates opportunity born from mainland chaos. The ravens that carry news of King Robert's death and the Northern Army's triumph over the Lannisters sing a different song to the Lord of the Iron Islands than they do to other lords of Westeros. "The Greenlands tear themselves apart," he declares to his assembled captains, his weathered face fierce with ambitions that have simmered for 9 years since his last failed rebellion. "Robert Baratheon is dead. The Lannister fleets burn in their harbors. The realm's attention focuses on King's Landing, while their coasts lie naked before us." Victarion Greyjoy, massive in his kraken-decorated armor, pounds his iron fist on the table with enthusiasm that makes the chamber echo. "The Iron Fleet stands ready, brother. Our ships hunger for battle, our men thirst for the old way. Give the word, and we'll remind the Greenlands why they fear the sea." But it is Usher Greyjoy who voices the caution that a wiser man might heed. The North has shown itself capable of destroying the most powerful house in Westeros. Are we certain they've forgotten how to build ships as well as swing swords? Balon's laugh carries the harsh mockery that has marked his entire reign. "Northern ships, the wolves know ice and snow, not salt and steel. Let them play at southern politics while we take what the drowned god offers us." The decision, when it comes, surprises no one who knows the Lord of the Iron Islands. Within days, the Iron Fleet takes to the waves like a plague of black-winged ravens, their longships cutting through the grey waters toward a coastline that has known peace for too long. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Theon Greyjoy learns of his father's rebellion through reports that arrive like physical blows. The young man who has spent half his life as Ned Stark's ward now faces the terrible choice between blood and honor, between the family that birthed him and the family that raised him. "My lord," he says to Ned, during a private meeting in the Tower of the Hand, his voice thick with emotions he struggles to control. "I've received word from home. My father, he's called his banners. The Iron Fleet sails against the crown." Ned's grey eyes soften with understanding, recognizing the agony that tears at the young man's heart. "I know, Theon. The question is what you choose to do about it." "My place is with you," Theon replies, though the words come hard. "You've been more of a father to me than the man who gave me life. House Stark has my loyalty, whatever that may cost." The conversation that follows shapes not just Theon's future, but the Crown's response to the Ironborn threat. His knowledge of Iron Island's tactics and traditions proves invaluable as King Stannis and his advisors plan their counter-offensive. "They'll strike at Lannisport first," Theon explains during a war council. "My father believes the western coast lies defenseless, with Tywin's fleet destroyed and his armies scattered, but they won't expect coordinated resistance from White Harbour's ships." Indeed, in the great harbour of White Harbour, Lord Wyman Manderley's fleet prepares for war with an efficiency that would surprise those who see only the Lord's portly frame and jovial manner. The Manderley Navy, built over generations to protect northern trade routes, represents a maritime power that the Ironborn have never faced in their previous raids. 50 war galleys and twice as many merchant vessels that can be armed for battle, reports Sir Marlon Manderley to the assembled northern commanders. "We know these waters better than any reaver, and our men fight for something more than plunder." The first clashes come sooner than anyone expects. Victarion Greyjoy leads the Iron Fleet's vanguard against what he believes to be helpless merchant shipping near the Arbor, only to discover that the merchants carry northern steel and fight with the discipline that has made the wolf banners feared from the Wall to Dawn. The battle that follows becomes a slaughter that will be remembered in the Iron Islands for generations. Victarion's flagship, the Iron Victory, finds itself surrounded by vessels that fight not as individual raiders, but as a coordinated fleet. Northern crossbowmen rain death from fighting tops, while disciplined marines board Ironborn ships with methodical efficiency. Victarion himself falls when northern steel finds the gaps in his Kraken armor. His last sight, the wolf banners flying from ships that were supposed to be easy prey. His death sends shockwaves through the Iron Fleet that had never imagined their greatest warrior could be brought low by Greenlander tactics. Word of the disaster reaches Pike within days, carried by the few Ironborn ships that escaped the northern trap. Balon Greyjoy receives the news in stunned silence, his dreams of easy conquest crumbling like sandcastles before the tide. "How?" he demands of the surviving captain who brings word of his brother's death. "How did the Greenlands know we were coming?" "They were waiting for us, my lord," the man replies, his face pale with the memory of slaughter. "Waiting like they knew our plans before we made them. Their ships moved like a pack of wolves, coordinated and deadly." The truth, though Balon doesn't yet understand it, lies in the intelligence networks that serve the new regime. Varys's little birds and the Northern Army's efficient reconnaissance have provided King Stannis with detailed knowledge of Ironborn movements. The element of surprise that made previous rebellions possible has been stripped away by enemies who value preparation over glory. But the northern response goes beyond mere naval defense. King Stannis himself, the man who held Dragonstone for Robert and knows the sea as well as any lord in Westeros, takes personal command of the combined royal fleet. His war galleys, reinforced by northern ships and manned by crews who fight for justice rather than plunder, sail toward the Iron Islands with grim purpose. "We end this rebellion before it begins," Stannis declares from the deck of his flagship. "The Ironborn mistake our mainland concerns for weakness. They will learn the cost of that error." The siege of Pike that follows demonstrates the changed military dynamics of this new Westeros, where Robert's rebellion was defeated by superior Ironborn knowledge of their home waters. This campaign succeeds through careful planning and overwhelming force. Northern engineers, veterans of sieges in the frozen wastes, adapt their techniques to island warfare with devastating effect. Asha Greyjoy, perhaps the wisest of Balon's children, recognizes the futility of continued resistance before her father does. She takes a small, fast ship to treat with the royal fleet under a flag of truce, her sharp mind grasping what masculine pride prevents her father from accepting. "We yield," she declares to King Stannis aboard his flagship, her words carrying the bitter taste of defeat. "The Iron Islands submit to the Iron Throne's justice in exchange for mercy for our people." Stannis studies the young woman with eyes that have seen through the lies and boasts of ambitious lords for years. "Your father's rebellion has cost the realm ships and men it could not afford to lose. What mercy do you imagine you deserve?" "The mercy of a king who values stability over vengeance," Asha replies. "Execute my father if you must, but spare the islands themselves. We can serve the crown as we once served the Targaryens, if given the chance to prove our loyalty." The negotiations that follow determine not just the fate of the Iron Islands, but the precedent for how the new regime deals with rebellion. Unlike Robert's tendency toward generous pardons that often bred future treachery, Stannis demands concrete guarantees and lasting reforms. The settlement that emerges strips much of the Ironborn traditional independence, while offering them a path toward redemption through service to the crown. Balon Greyjoy, like the Lannisters before him, pays with his life for the crime of rebellion. But his people, led by Asha under strict royal oversight, find themselves offered something the old ways never provided: the chance to build rather than merely raid. Theon Greyjoy, watching from the deck of a northern ship as his birthplace burns, feels the complex emotions of a man who has lost one family to save another. His choice to stand with the Starks has preserved thousands of lives on both sides of the conflict, but the price remains written in the smoke that rises from Pike's ancient towers. "You did the right thing," Ned tells him as they watch the Ironborn banners come down for the final time. "Honor sometimes demands terrible choices, but that doesn't make them wrong." The Greyjoy Rebellion, as it comes to be known, lasts barely 3 months from start to finish. Its swift conclusion demonstrates the new regime's ability to project power across vast distances while maintaining domestic stability. More importantly, it shows that the northern model of justice, harsh but fair, final but not needlessly cruel, can be applied to the most difficult challenges of royal governance. With the Iron Islands subdued and their fleet scattered or captured, Stannis returns to King's Landing with the satisfaction of a king who has proven his authority extends beyond the mainland. The rebellion that Balon Greyjoy thought would exploit the realm's weakness instead becomes the first great victory of the new dynasty, cementing northern influence and demonstrating that honor backed by competent force can triumph over ambition fueled by pride. But as autumn deepens toward winter and the first snows begin to fall across Westeros, new challenges loom on every horizon. The realm has been unified through steel and justice, but the true test of any dynasty lies not in its ability to win wars, but in its capacity to maintain peace when external pressures mount and internal divisions threaten the foundations of order itself. The first snows of winter fall upon King's Landing, like a gentle warning from the gods themselves, dusting the Red Keep's towers with white that speaks of harsher times ahead. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark stands before maps that show the entire realm and considers challenges that no southern king has faced in living memory. Winter comes to Westeros with the certainty of death and taxes, but this winter arrives to find a realm ruled by men who understand its dangers. The granaries, he says to the assembled council, his finger tracing trade routes that stretch from White Harbour to Old Town. Every keep, every major town, every crossroads needs stores sufficient for 3 years of winter. The North has always planned for the long cold, but the rest of the realm has grown soft under Robert's endless summer. Lord Wyman Manderley nods approvingly from his seat, his bulk concealing the sharp mind that has made White Harbour the most prosperous port in the North. The merchant guilds resist the expense, my lord. They claim such preparations will bankrupt trade for years to come. Better bankrupt than starved, Stannis replies with the harsh practicality that marks all his decisions. We'll purchase grain from Essos if necessary, empty the royal treasury if we must. A kingdom of corpses serves no one. The massive undertaking that follows dwarfs any logistical effort since Aegon's conquest. Ravens fly to every corner of Westeros, carrying orders that transform the realm's approach to winter preparation. Northern expertise, long dismissed by southern lords as northern paranoia, suddenly becomes the foundation of royal policy. Sir Davos Seaworth, now serving as Master of Ships, coordinates the maritime aspects of the Great Provisioning. His fleet of merchant vessels, reinforced by captured ironborne ships, carries grain and preserved foods from every corner of the known world to fill storehouses that had stood empty under Robert's careless rule. The Free Cities profit handsomely from our preparations, he reports during one of the endless planning sessions. But Norvoshi grain and Tiroshi preserves may mean the difference between order and chaos when the true cold comes. Meanwhile, far to the north, where the wall rises like a blade of ice against the grey sky, the Night's Watch receives support that no Lord Commander has seen in living memory. Stannis' commitment to winter preparation extends beyond mere civilian needs to the realm's most important and neglected defenders. Jon Snow watches from Castle Black's walls as supply wagons arrive in numbers that would have seemed impossible under Robert's reign. Weapons, warm clothing, preserved foods, and most importantly, men, volunteers and pressed criminals alike, swell the Watch's ranks for the first time in decades. Your father has not forgotten us, Maester Aemon tells him during one of their evening conversations in the old Targaryen's chambers. Few kings remember that the wall protects the entire realm, not just the north. This support may prove more valuable than gold when the real test comes. Jon's letters south carry more than gratitude for the unprecedented aid. They speak of changes beyond the wall that trouble even veteran rangers, of wildling movements that suggest desperation rather than mere raiding, of things glimpsed in the far north that defy rational explanation. The free folk flee something, he writes to his father. Mance Rayder gathers them in numbers not seen since the king beyond the wall, but they run toward the wall rather than away from it. Whatever drives them speaks of threats the realm may not be prepared to face. At the wall, young Samwell Tarly's scholarly work takes on new importance as his research into ancient winters and forgotten threats attracts royal attention. The fat boy from Horn Hill, once mocked by his father as worthless, finds his knowledge of old texts and historical patterns suddenly valued by the most powerful men in Westeros. The books speak of winters that lasted years, he tells Jon during one of their late-night study sessions. The long night, when darkness covered the world and things walked that should not walk. The maesters call them legends, but the dates match too well to be mere stories. Sam's reports, copied carefully and sent south by Raven, reach Stannis' court where they're studied with the same intensity as military intelligence. The new king may not believe in ancient evils, but he believes in preparation for any possibility, no matter how remote it might seem. In Winterfell, where autumn's chill carries the promise of harsher times ahead, recovery and growth continue despite the absence of the castle's lord. Bran Stark, confined to his bed, but no longer hovering between life and death, experiences dreams that trouble even Maester Luwin's scientific mind. The boy who fell from a tower speaks of visions that seem to stretch beyond the realm of normal sleep. "I see things," he tells his mother during one of her visits to his chambers. "The gods would, but not as it is. Darker, colder, and there are things moving in the shadows that shouldn't be there." Catelyn Stark, pragmatic as always, attributes her son's disturbing dreams to his injuries and the trauma of his fall. But even she cannot dismiss the uncanny accuracy of some of his visions. Knowledge of events happening hundreds of miles away, details of conversations he could not possibly have overheard. "The old gods work in mysterious ways," old Nan tells the boy when his dreams become too vivid to ignore. "Perhaps your fall opened eyes that were always meant to see." The Stark line carries old blood, older than most remember. Young Rickon Stark, barely 4 years old, but forced by circumstances to grow beyond his years, takes on responsibilities that would challenge boys twice his age. Under Maester Luwin's careful guidance, he begins learning the basics of lordship, while his father serves as hand and his older brother prepares for eventual rule. "He asks questions that surprise me," Luwin confides to Catelyn. "Not the questions of a child seeking entertainment, but the questions of a lord learning to rule. The boy understands, perhaps better than we give him credit for, that winter will test everything we've built." In King's Landing, the religious tensions that simmer beneath the surface of the new regime begin to boil over as winter approaches. The faith of the Seven, long dominant in the southern kingdoms, finds itself challenged not just by the old gods that the northern army brought south, but by the Red Priestess who serves King Stannis with increasing influence. Melisandre's presence in the Red Keep creates controversy that extends far beyond court politics. Her prophecies of winter's dangers, delivered with the certainty of one who claims to see the future, align uncomfortably well with the practical preparations that northern wisdom demands. "The night is dark and full of terrors," she intones during one of her public ceremonies, her ruby necklace glowing like captured fire. "But the Lord of Light provides warmth for those wise enough to kindle proper flames. Winter comes, but it need not bring defeat for those who serve the true God." The High Septon's response, delivered from the great sept of Baelor, carries the weight of centuries of tradition and the authority of the faith's hierarchy. The Seven have protected Westeros through countless winters. Foreign gods and foreign prophecies offer nothing that prayer and preparation cannot provide more surely. Ned Stark finds himself mediating between competing religious visions with the same careful diplomacy he brings to all political challenges. His own faith in the old gods remains unshaken, but he recognizes the practical value of unity in the face of winter's approach. "Let each man worship as his conscience demands," he declares during a public address that attempts to calm religious tensions. "The gods, whether they be 7 or 1 or old and nameless, care more for just deeds than for perfect doctrine. Winter comes for believers and skeptics alike. The economic preparations for winter create their own challenges as the massive grain purchases and storage programs strain the realm's finances despite the improved governance. The Iron Bank's representatives arrive in King's Landing to assess the Crown's ability to service its debts while funding such ambitious preparations. Your winter preparations are admirable, Tycho Nestoris observes during negotiations in the Tower of the Hand, but they represent unprecedented expenditure. How does the Crown propose to balance current needs against future obligations? By ensuring there's a future to have obligations in, Stannis replies with characteristic bluntness. A bankrupt kingdom that survives winter is preferable to a solvent kingdom that starves in the snow. The discussions that follow establish new financial arrangements that spread the cost of winter preparation across multiple years while ensuring the realm's immediate needs are met. Northern pragmatism, applied to southern finance, creates solutions that neither region could have achieved alone. As the first winter storms begin to lash the coasts of Westeros, the realm that Stannis and Ned govern looks very different from the one Robert left behind. Granaries bulge with stores that could feed entire cities. The Night's Watch stands stronger than it has in generations. Religious diversity, though sometimes contentious, provides multiple sources of comfort and guidance for troubled times. But the true test lies ahead, in the depths of winter, when cold and darkness challenge everything the living have built. The northern way of meeting such challenges, with preparation, determination, and unwavering resolve, has been extended throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Whether it will prove sufficient remains to be seen when winter's full fury descends upon a realm that has never faced such trials under united leadership. But for the first time in living memory, Westeros approaches the long cold with leaders who understand its dangers and subjects who have been prepared for its challenges. The Game of Thrones continues, but winter cares nothing for politics or ambition. In the end, all who live must face the cold together, or perish alone in the darkness that comes when the sun fails to rise and the wind carries death on its breath. The great hall of Winterfell has never echoed with such momentous decisions as those debated on this crisp morning in the second month of 299 AEC. Northern lords who once marched south with fire in their hearts now sit in council, wrestling with questions that will define their houses for generations to come. A year has passed since Ned Stark led the largest army the North had ever assembled to King's Landing, and the time has come to determine whether that march was a temporary expedition or a permanent change in the balance of power. "We've done what we set out to do," the great Jon Umber declares, his massive fist pounding the ancient oak table hard enough to make the pewter cups dance. Justice has been served, the realm has been set right, the king sits secure upon his throne. It's time for northern lords to return to northern lands. Rose Bolton's pale eyes remain fixed on the maps that show troop deployments across 2 kingdoms. The question is whether King Stannis can maintain order without our continued presence. Remove northern steel from King's Landing, and how long before southern ambition reasserts itself? The debate that follows touches the very heart of northern identity and the price of justice. For 1,000 years, the North has remained largely separate from southern politics, content to rule their own lands according to their own customs. But the events of the past year have drawn them deeper into the Game of Thrones than any generation since Torrhen Stark knelt before Aegon the Conqueror. Meanwhile, in the Red Keep's tower chambers, King Stannis Baratheon contemplates the reports that arrive daily from his spy master and lords. The realm prospers under his rule, trade flourishes, the crown's debts diminish steadily, and no serious rebellions threaten the peace. Yet every success depends increasingly upon northern support, northern efficiency, northern moral authority, backing his harsh but just decisions. Lord Stark's presence legitimizes every difficult choice we make, he admits to Sir Davos during one of their private conversations. His reputation for honor gives weight to policies that might otherwise seem arbitrary or cruel. But how long can a king rely upon borrowed authority? Perhaps the question is whether that authority is truly borrowed, Davos suggests carefully. You and Lord Ned seem to share similar values, similar goals. Perhaps what appears to be dependence is actually partnership. The distinction matters more than mere semantics, for it determines whether the new regime represents temporary northern intervention or permanent political transformation. Stannis has never sought popularity, but he recognizes that effective rule requires more than mere legal authority. At Winterfell, Robb Stark's coming-of-age ceremony carries symbolic weight that extends far beyond one young man's passage into adulthood. The heir to the north stands before the heart tree in the godswood, his auburn hair catching the morning light as he swears oaths that bind him not just to his ancestral lands, but to the southern responsibilities his father has assumed. "I swear by the old gods and the new that I will serve the realm as my father serves it," he declares, his young voice carrying the gravity of someone who understands the full weight of his words. "Whether that service takes me to Winterfell's halls or King's Landing's throne room, I will honor the trust my bloodline has earned." Catelyn Stark watches her son's ceremony with emotions that war between pride and concern. The boy who should inherit only northern lands and northern duties now shoulders obligations that stretch from the Wall to Dawn. The choices made in service of justice have bound the Stark line to southern politics in ways that may prove impossible to escape. Later, when the ceremony concludes and the witnesses disperse, she speaks privately with her eldest son about the burdens he must carry. "Your father changed the realm, but in doing so, he changed our family's destiny. You'll face choices he never had to make." "I know," Robb replies with the seriousness that marks him as Ned's son. "But isn't that the price of doing what's right? If we only act when it's convenient, when it costs us a nothing, are we truly acting justly?" The question echoes in political discussions throughout both kingdoms as lords and ladies wrestle with the new reality. Some see opportunity in the unprecedented northern influence over royal policy. Others worry about the precedent of regional powers dictating terms to the Iron Throne. In the Riverlands, Catelyn embarks upon a diplomatic mission that takes her to houses still wavering in their support for the new regime. Her task is delicate: to secure lasting alliances without appearing to threaten those who hesitate to embrace change. The daughter of House Tully brings skills honed through years of managing competing interests among prideful lords. "The realm has found stability," she tells Lord Jason Mallister during negotiations at Seaguard. "Trade prospers, the crown pays its debts, justice is done without favor or corruption." Why would any lord prefer a return to Robert's chaos? "Because chaos provided opportunities that order does not," Lord Mallister replies, with the honesty of a man who has survived multiple regime changes. Under Robert, a clever lord could profit from the crown's weaknesses. Under Stannis, a lord must depend upon honest service and fair dealing. "And is that truly a disadvantage?" Catelyn asks, with the gentle persistence that has made her an effective negotiator. "Would you rather your sons inherit a realm where success depends upon cunning, or one where it depends upon worth?" The conversations that follow establish patterns repeated throughout the kingdoms as the new order consolidates its support among houses that value stability over opportunity for manipulation. But even as political alliances solidify, disturbing reports from the Wall create new concerns for leaders already wrestling with complex challenges. Jon Snow's letters carry increasingly urgent warnings about activities beyond the Wall that defy normal explanation. "The wildlings flee something," he writes in his latest dispatch to his father. "Mance Rayder's gathering exceeds anything in living memory, but they move toward the Wall rather than away from it. Our rangers report strange movements in the deep wilderness, tracks in the snow that belong to nothing known. Master Aemon speaks of old warnings, ancient threats that the realm has forgotten, but the North remembers." The reports create uncomfortable questions about resource allocation and strategic priorities. The realm's military strength remains committed to maintaining southern stability, while potential threats gather in the far north, where few lords have ever looked for danger. In King's Landing, the small council debates the fate of Tyrion Lannister, with discussions that reveal fundamental disagreements about justice and mercy. The Dwarf Lord has languished in comfortable imprisonment for nearly a year, his execution delayed by debates about the precedent such actions might establish. He committed no crime beyond loyalty to his family, Sir Davos argues during one particularly heated session. Executing men for family loyalty sets a dangerous precedent for any lord who might someday oppose royal policy. His family's loyalty included treason, incest, and murder, Grandmaster Qyburn counters. At what point does family solidarity become complicity in crime? Lord Tyrion knew his father's character, his sister's nature, his family's methods. Stannis listens to the arguments with the patience that marks all his most difficult decisions. The choice between mercy and justice often proves more complex than his reputation for harsh certainty would suggest. The realm watches how we handle this case, Ned observes quietly. Our decision will be remembered by every lord who must someday choose between family and crown. Meanwhile, Sansa Stark's political education continues under the guidance of her mother and the northern ladies who have remained at court. The girl who once dreamed of southern gallantry and romantic ideals now learns the harder lessons of governance and diplomacy. Ruling requires understanding people, Catelyn teaches during one of their private lessons. Not just their public faces or their declared intentions, but their fears, their ambitions, their desperate needs. A good ruler protects those who cannot protect themselves while managing those who refuse to govern themselves. The lessons prove immediately relevant as Sansa observes the complex negotiations surrounding marriage alliances, trade agreements, and regional conflicts. Her betrothal to Wireless Manderley has been formalized, but the political implications extend far beyond personal happiness. I understand why the marriage is necessary, she confides to her mother. But I also understand that my children will inherit obligations to both North and South that no generation before has carried. The economic prosperity that has returned to most of Westeros under stable leadership provides tangible evidence of the new regime's success. Merchants report profits that seemed impossible under Robert's chaotic rule, while farmers find ready markets for crops that would have rotted in royal warehouses during previous reigns. Trade routes that were death traps under the late king now operate with efficiency that rivals the free cities, reports Lord Wyman Manderley during a financial review. The Crown's prompt payment of debts has restored confidence throughout the merchant community. But prosperity creates its own political challenges, as success breeds questions about whether such achievements require permanent northern involvement or whether they represent temporary improvements that might survive political change. In the Godswood of King's Landing, where the Heart Tree has become a place of genuine reverence rather than mere decoration, Ned Stark contemplates questions that have no easy answers. A year of service as Hand has achieved everything he hoped: justice, stability, honest governance, but at the cost of binding his family's future to southern politics in ways that may prove permanent. The realm is healing, he tells the ancient tree, whose red leaves rustle in the winter wind. But healing often leaves scars that change what was into something new. The north that my sons inherit may bear little resemblance to the north I knew. The recognition carries both promise and peril. Change, even change for the better, destroys as well as creates. The question facing the realm as winter deepens is whether the new order can preserve the best of what existed while discarding the worst, or whether transformation requires accepting loss as the price of progress. Above them all, winter continues its inexorable approach, bringing with it challenges that will test every alliance, every assumption, every carefully crafted political arrangement. The true measure of the new regime lies not in its ability to manage prosperity, but in its capacity to endure whatever trials the coming darkness might bring. The great sept of Baelor echoes with voices raised in prayer as King's Landing marks the first anniversary of Stannis Baratheon's coronation, with ceremonies that blend southern tradition and northern reverence in ways that would have seemed impossible mere years ago. The capital that once knew only the faith of the Seven now accommodates multiple forms of worship, while the political order that emerged from northern steel and stark justice has proven more enduring than even its architects dared hope. In the Red Keep's throne room, where the Iron Throne gleams beneath torchlight that seems somehow warmer than in years past, King Stannis receives the reports that mark his first year of rule. The ledgers tell a story of transformation that extends far beyond mere numbers. Trade revenue increased by 40%, crown debts reduced by half, and not a single major rebellion or regional conflict to darken the realm's growing prosperity. 1 year, he observes to Ned Stark, who stands beside the throne as he has for these 12 months of justice and hard choices. Has it been worth the cost? Ned considers the question with the gravity it deserves, his grey eyes reflecting on battles fought, lives lost, and the enormous changes wrought through their shared determination to set the realm right. Ask me again when winter ends, and we see what we've built together. But today, seeing King's Landing without the smell of fear in its streets, I believe we've done something worthwhile. The assessment proves more prophetic than either man realizes, for even as they speak of accomplishments, new challenges gather on horizons both near and distant. In the Tower of the Hand, where Ned has spent countless hours wrestling with the complexities of southern governance, a letter waits that will reshape their understanding of the trials ahead. Jon Snow's latest communication from the Wall carries news that chills even veteran commanders who have seen the worst that war can offer. His careful script describes events beyond the ancient barrier that defy rational explanation, movements in the far north that speak of threats the realm has never faced in recorded history. Mance Rayder's host numbers over 100,000, the letter reads. But they flee southward in terror of something even they will not name. Our rangers report abandoned wildling settlements that show signs of violence, but no bodies, no blood, no explanation for what drove them away. Maester Aemon speaks of the long night, of darkness that lasted a generation, of things that walked when they shouldn't walk. I pray these are merely legends, but the fear in every wildling's eyes suggests otherwise. The words hang in the air like a prophecy as Ned shares them with his king during their evening council. Both men understand the implications of threats that could unite every free folk north of the Wall in desperate flight toward the very barrier they have spent generations trying to breach. Double the reinforcements to Castle Black, Stannis commands without hesitation, and send word to every lord from the Wall to Winterfell. If winter brings more than cold and snow, the realm must be ready to face it united. Meanwhile, far across the narrow sea, where dragons soar above the Dothraki Sea, and impossible dreams take wing on scales of black and red and cream, Daenerys Targaryen receives her own reports of the changed political landscape in Westeros. Her advisors speak of a realm united under competent leadership, of economic prosperity, of military strength that grows rather than diminishes with each passing season. Your enemies grow stronger while we prepare, Ser Jorah observes, with the careful honesty that has made him valuable despite his past mistakes. The Northern Army has proven capable of destroying houses that ruled for centuries. King Stannis has shown he can maintain order where Robert brought only chaos. Daenerys considers this news while her dragons circle overhead, their wings casting shadows that promise fire and blood to any who would stand against their mother's claim. Then perhaps it is time to test whether their steel can withstand dragon fire, she muses, her violet eyes reflecting ambitions that have only grown with her power. The Game of Thrones continues, even as one phase draws to a close, for ambition never sleeps, and power always attracts those who would seize it for themselves. But the realm that any claimant would seek to conquer has been transformed by the events of this crucial year. At Winterfell, where winter's grip tightens with each passing day, Bran Stark experiences dreams that trouble even the maesters who tend his recovery. The boy who fell from a tower speaks of visions that stretch beyond the normal realm of sleep. Prophecies that suggest the conflicts just concluded represent merely the first act in a much larger drama. I see armies of the dead, he tells Maester Luwin during one of their sessions. Ice and darkness spreading south like a tide that devours everything in its path. The living fight, the living while true death gathers strength in places where summer has never come. Old Nan, listening from her corner where she tends the fire, nods with the wisdom of someone who remembers stories older than kingdoms. The boy sees true, though he may not understand what he sees. Winter comes, but not the winter men expect. The old tales speak of such times, when the long night fell and heroes rose to meet it. In King's Landing, the northern cultural influences that began with the army's arrival have taken root in ways that will outlast any political change. The harvest festivals of the north now complement southern holy days, while the directness of northern speech has begun to influence court discourse in directions that favor honesty over elaborate courtesy. Lord Wyman Manderley, observing these changes during preparations for his son's wedding to Sansa Stark, reflects on transformation that extends beyond mere politics. The realm doesn't just have northern rulers, he tells his companions. It has begun to adopt northern values that may prove more lasting than any military victory. The wedding itself, when it takes place in the rebuilt sept with both southern and northern traditions honored, symbolizes the deeper unity that has emerged from the year's trials. Sansa Stark and Wylis Manderley exchange vows that bind not just two young people, but two approaches to governance, two ways of understanding honor and duty. But even as celebration echoes through the capital, Ned Stark makes the decision that will define the next phase of his service to the realm. In private conversation with King Stannis, he announces his intention to return to Winterfell, while maintaining the bonds forged through shared struggle and mutual respect. The North needs its lord, he explains during their final meeting as Hand and King. Winter comes with challenges that require my presence at Winterfell, but the ties we've built will endure. Distance need not mean division when trust has been earned through deeds rather than words. Stannis accepts the decision with the understanding of a man who has learned to value honest counsel over flattery. Go north with my gratitude and friendship, but know that ravens fly both directions, and wise kings listen to advisers who speak truth rather than convenience. The transition that follows demonstrates the institutional strength built over the year of shared governance. Sir Davos Seaworth assumes greater responsibilities while maintaining the northern influence that has proven so valuable. The system built through necessity evolves into something designed to endure. As preparations begin for the Stark family's return to Winterfell, King's Landing prepares to bid farewell to the northern lords who have shaped its transformation. The army that marched south to seek justice prepares to return home, but they leave behind changes that will outlast their presence. The economic partnerships forged through honest dealing continue to flourish. The cultural exchanges that began with military necessity evolve into lasting traditions. Most importantly, the precedent of competent governance, backed by moral authority, provides a foundation that future challenges may test, but cannot easily destroy. On the final evening before departure, as snow begins to fall over the capital, in patterns that speak of winter's deepening grip, a raven arrives from the far north, bearing news that will reshape every plan and assumption. The bird, exhausted from its long flight, carries reports from the Shadow Tower that chill the blood of every man who hears them. Dead things in the woods. The message reads in the careful script of a ranger who has seen the impossible. Dead things that walk and kill and do not stay dead. The wall was built for a reason, and that reason rides south with eyes like blue stars and a hunger that cannot be satisfied. The long night comes again. The words fall into the throne room like stones into still water, creating ripples that will spread throughout the 7 kingdoms and beyond. The political victories of the past year, the economic prosperity, the careful alliance building, all of it may prove merely preparation for a test that no living man has faced. King Stannis reads the report twice before setting it carefully on the Iron Throne's armrest. Around him, advisors and lords exchange glances that speak of challenges beyond anything they have yet encountered. The realm they have worked so hard to unite may face its ultimate trial sooner than anyone imagined. Send word to every lord, every keep, every sworn sword from the wall to the reach, he commands, with the authority of a king who has learned that preparation prevents panic. The realm faces winter, but perhaps not the winter we expected. If the ancient threats wake, we will meet them as our ancestors did, together, united, and unafraid. Outside the Red Keep's walls, the first true snow of winter begins to fall in earnest, covering the capital in white that speaks of beauty and death in equal measure. The Game of Thrones continues, but the stakes have risen beyond mere political power to the survival of everything the living have built. In this transformed realm, where northern honor shapes southern policy, and ancient enemies have learned to stand together against common threats, the true test lies ahead. But for the first time in living memory, Westeros approaches that test unified under leaders who understand that some challenges can only be met through cooperation rather than competition. The long night may be coming, but it will find the Seven Kingdoms ready to meet it with fire and steel, with dragons and direwolves, with the combined strength of all who choose light over darkness and life over death. The greatest game is about to begin, and this time, the very future of the world hangs in the balance.